Welcome to Win Wednesdays. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and you'll be able to view the recording at www.acceleratingwin.org. If you have any questions for our presenters as we're moving through today's session, please feel free to add them to the Q&A in your Zoom screen. The Women in Industry initiative at Point Park University is about educating and empowering. It's about accelerating the success of women-identified students and professionals, engaging leaders, affecting conversations, and encouraging allyship through elevating experiences. We have several initiatives under our umbrella of Women in Industry. The Accelerating Women in Industry workshop that corresponds to International Women's Day that will be coming up in March of 2021. We, when conditions allow, have a campus speaker series. We have this Win Wednesdays virtual speaker series, which are joining in with us today. And we will be adding some new outreach activities in 2021, so stay tuned. You can also support our efforts through our website, and you'll find the link below. You can go to pointpark.edu/business and then link to Women in Industry if you'd like to support our work. I'm Doreen Saletti with Roland School of Business at Point Park University, here with my colleague Sandy Mervosh, and I'm going to turn it over to Sandy to introduce today's guests.
Thank you, Doreen. We're really pleased today to have two exceptional individuals with us. We have Elizabeth Lamping. She is the Executive Director of PHRA, Pittsburgh Human Resource Association. For over a decade, Liz Lamping has led Pittsburgh Human Resource Association and transformed it into one of the largest Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM's, chapters. She is responsible for ensuring the PHRA members have high-quality development and certification programs, HR content and resources, and professional networking opportunities while accounting for sustained operational and financial growth. Under her leadership, the PHRA has been recognized as an outstanding organization by the PA State Council and has been the recipient of numerous Excel Platinum Awards from SHRM for the advancing of the HR profession. Liz has served on the board and advisory committees for several area nonprofit organizations and institutes for higher education, including Girl Scouts of Western PA and Slippery Rock University's Business School. She is the recipient of awards of distinction from her community and was recognized by Pittsburgh Magazine as a 40 Under 40 award recipient. Liz graduated from Carnegie Mellon University and currently resides in Frankfurt, Germany with her family. Thank you, Liz, for joining us today. We also have with us today Catherine Miller. Catherine Miller is PHRA's Membership Development Specialist and works alongside PHRA Executive Director Liz Lamping. With a passion for empowering others to grow and develop their full potential, Catherine is responsible for executing the development of high-quality programs and events, both educational and networking. In her role, Catherine works hard to provide a first-rate experience for current and potential members through a variety of recruitment and retention efforts. Joining the PHRA team in 2016, Catherine began as an intern and a membership coordinator, where she was responsible for executing administrative tasks such as correspondence, filing, and dues processing to ensure the operations of the office run smoothly. She holds a bachelor's degree in human resource management from Point Park University and has successfully passed SHRM's Assurance of Learning exam, an exam for graduating HR students at the proficient level. Catherine joined the PHRA staff after starting as a student member and participating in both the Buddy program and the Job Shadowing program. In her spare time, you can expect to find Catherine reading on her Kindle e-reader, volunteering with her local fire department as an associate member, or making crafts with her little sister through Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So thank you both for joining us today and sharing the 8 ways to make the most of networking in a virtual world.
All right. Well, thanks, Sandy. I appreciate you having us all today. So the global pandemic has caused innumerable shifts to the way that people live, work, and do business. And one major change that we're experiencing is how we are able to connect with others. Since March, people have been called to master video conferencing and new technologies that make business and communication possible in a socially distant world. Today, Liz and I will be discussing the 8 ways to make the most of networking in a virtual world. If you happen to have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the question and answer box to send them in, and we will address questions at the conclusion. We were going to start by introducing the presenters, but I appreciate Sandy for taking care of that for us today. So Doreen, if we wouldn't mind, oh, you already done it, perfect. So here's what we will be discussing today, the 8 ways to make the most of networking in a virtual world. First, we will discuss professional presentation and pre-networking tips, how to introduce yourself and reach out to others, preparing your introduction, preparing like you would an in-person networking event, getting contact information, asking great questions, bringing the positive attitude, and avoiding the negative. We will begin our presentation today by discussing professional presentation and pre-networking tips. So before you begin and attend a virtual networking event, there are a few important things that you should know and do. The first and likely most important tip is to make sure that you are comfortable with your technology as well as your device, whether it's a laptop, your iPad, or another kind of tablet. Test your system prior to the start of the event to double check that the platform that you are using is compatible with your device. Platforms like Zoom, GoToMeeting, etc., all have test features within their website. And this is best done either the day before a networking event's to take place or at the very least the morning before. The second tip is to ensure that your camera and your microphone are operational and the platform and device that you are using are all up to date. A networking event in person or online can honestly be daunting. So while you may be able to cover your camera during a virtual event, I would encourage you to make sure that it is turned on and you are visible during the entirety of your networking event. Number 3, once you have confirmed that your device and your networking platform are in working order and everything's operational, you will want to make sure that your device is placed on a platform so that it's level with your face and that you're looking straight ahead like we are all today. You don't want people to be looking up your nose on a call, and you also don't want to be looking down at the other networking participants either. Placing books under your device will work perfectly to level that out. Number 4, the area you pick to take the call should have plenty of light, whether it's natural light behind you or large lamps and overhead lighting. Do your best to position yourself to keep some shadows off of your face so everybody can see you clearly. If the lighting in your home isn't the best, you can purchase a circular light that clips to your device to shine light on your face called a ring light clip. And you can find these on Amazon for about $12 to $15. Fifth tip, you want the area behind you to represent you in a professional manner. So consider taking your call in a home office, in front of a wall with a nice photo or a piece of artwork hung up, maybe near a table with some books or plants or a bookshelf, and ensure that the room is clean and tidy. I wouldn't recommend an electronic background for these Zoom meetings or the Zoom networking meetings unless you have a green screen. We see many calls where participants have an excellent electronic background chosen, but the lighting's unstable or they don't have a green screen, and all they do is move and suddenly you have a floating head. So do your best to avoid this and find a nice backdrop that's already set up in your home. So the images that you're seeing on your screen right now are an excellent example of the first 5 pre-networking tips that we just discussed. The images of Pennsylvania's Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman were taken during an interview he had given last month. So as you can see in the picture on the left, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman has his laptop elevated on a number of books to elevate his laptop so it's level with his face and the camera's level with his face. He also has chosen an excellent background behind him with a plain wall and a few decorations on a table. In this case, it's a plant and some photos of his family. The background looks very clean and professional, which should be the ultimate goal when you're selecting a backdrop for your meetings and your networking events. And that stand that you see to the right, hovering above his dog, is actually a ring light stand. So this lighting, as we mentioned, is a very vital element when it comes to these Zoom calls and Zoom networking meetings, and is often the most forgotten about. So if you don't have a good lighting in your home, whether it's overhead lighting or a natural window, as previously mentioned, a ring light clip is a really good alternative to that. And in the photo on the right, that's what you and I would have seen had we viewed the interview live on TV. So this photo is a really good reference point for camera positioning, lighting, and then his backdrop. And now we'll move on to the next 3 pre-networking tips. So networking tip number 6 is to choose a quiet area free from distractions to attend the event in. So consider maybe leaving your phone in a different room so you're not tempted to pick it up during the networking event. Remember, everybody can see you picking up your phone and replying to that text, or if you're opening up a Snapchat to see it, and first impressions do matter. Number 7 is to be tidy. Make sure you're cleaning up the space around you. You'll want to remove any clutter, unnecessary items on your desk or table, and doing so allows you to focus on the networking event without getting distracted by any of the mess and stuff piled up next to you. Number 8, look the part. In a virtual world, event participants are only going to see you from the waist up. So while it may be tempting to wear PJ pants and slippers with your button-up shirt or your blouse, dress for a virtual networking event just as you would for an in-person one. This tip will help you feel more prepared and certainly more confident for the upcoming call and networking event. And now that we've completed our pre-event networking tips, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Liz to discuss the best ways to introduce yourself and reach out to others while in a virtual environment.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So I would love to discuss with everyone what our second tip is, which is how to introduce yourself and reach out to others during a virtual networking event. So gone are the days which you can mingle or bounce between different groups and introduce yourself to new people at your leisure. Today, the second you click Join Meeting, you're abruptly thrust in front of a potentially dozen of faces staring straight at you. I like to refer to this as Brady Bunch style. Not sure if the audience will know who the Brady Bunch is, but Google it and you will see. This can be a very jarring experience, and if you aren't prepared before you hit Join Meeting, it can be extremely scary. So let's get ready and let's prepare. So in my experience, networking events often start with an open chat or a dialogue or an icebreaker as people join the call. Many participants will answer the questions that the host asks during this time, but few attempt to engage at all with one another. So to make an impression, it is important to speak up and comment. If someone says something that interests you, let them know. There likely won't be enough time to have an entire conversation about the topic of interest. However, you could certainly make someone feel good by listening and interacting with them. And this leads directly into our third tip, which is to prepare your introduction. So on a Zoom meeting, guests can't talk simultaneously or asynchronously to the whole group. The whole group, no matter how large, everybody can listen to one person at one time. We all know this, but we have to get comfortable with it, and be comfortable with it, you need to be prepared. So just as you would with an in-person event, you'll need to introduce yourself. Every virtual networking event provides attendees with a moment or two to introduce themselves. So instead of rushing to think of what to say while others are introducing themselves, think about your introduction before the event begins. Jot down some notes in a notebook or type a blurb into a Word document to have it handy when it's your turn to speak, and so you can use it from event to event. When crafting your intro, the more specific you can be about yourself and what your goals are, the better. But you do need to be sure to keep it very clear and very concise. I personally recommend no more than 4 sentences, and your introduction may need to change given the audience. So when you give your introduction, make sure that you look directly into your computer camera. It's tempting, but don't look at oneself on the screen. The group can see that you are not looking directly at them. And it's really important not to multitask by checking your phone while others are speaking. I know Catherine had already hit on this, but it's important to remember all participants at all times can see you. Another crucial tip for video conferencing is always to smile big. The camera, it carries your enthusiasm through, and again, everybody can see you. When you're live, it's not important which style of self-introduction you choose. What matters is that you're very open, enthusiastic, and happy to connect with everybody that's a part of the group. So the benefit to preparing your introduction ahead of time is that you can perfect your messaging so that you say exactly what it is that you want. You don't succumb to any of the pressures of trying to think of something on the spot. And ultimately, this helps you and makes you look more confident than you may feel at that exact moment. So preparing your introduction before the event allows you to be also more attentive to the other attendees while they're speaking. You have the opportunity to listen to the other attendees and you can focus on them. And while you listen to the other participants' intros, you could begin taking note on who you might like to connect with after the event. Which brings me to our fourth tip, which is to prepare like you would an in-person networking event. So if you were to attend an in-person networking event, with the PHRA for sure, we provide the lists in advance. So you would likely look at the list of attendees and the companies on the program to decide who it is that you would like to connect with. If the list of attendees for a virtual event is not available, you should still give some thought about the types of people that you would like to meet and from which companies and industries they may work for. So there's a few questions that you should personally think through and address before attending the event. Some of these questions could be just thinking through what your goal might be behind attending the networking event. Are you new in the area and do you want to expand your network? Or are you looking for an internship or a job opportunity? Maybe you're looking for a mentor or someone with a specific skill set. You should be thinking through these questions as you listen to the participants introduce themselves. So whatever your goal, you should have someone in mind who could help you meet that goal. But the most important part there too is to ensure your expectations are reasonable. And remember, if you're looking for someone to help you, be prepared to repay the offer and help them as well. So when I say that, as a student, you might be sitting there thinking that you don't have that much to offer just yet, but it could be something as simple as offering to volunteer your time to their organization. This helps you get your foot in the door and it benefits both parties. You're getting someone to help you with your goals and you're also helping them with their organization. The main difference between an in-person networking event and a virtual networking event is that everyone involved in the virtual happy hour will get to be a part of your conversation instead of one-on-one or in small groups. So this goes back to an earlier statement. On a Zoom meeting, guests can't talk simultaneously or asynchronously. The whole group, no matter how large, can listen to one person at one time. This means everyone's being heard. We all know this, but we have to be comfortable with it. And to be comfortable with it, we have to keep becoming prepared. It's very important to keep in mind that while you have a goal and you want to meet someone specifically to help you with your goal, it's important to involve everyone in the conversation. So if you want to be well regarded at the end of the virtual meeting, don't leave anyone out. But knowing who you want to meet is still very important. And that's where the fifth tip comes into play, which is get contact information. Because virtual networking events do not necessarily allow for the one-on-one conversations, it's most likely impossible for you to solidify the type of relationship you were looking for during the virtual meeting. That's why you want to make sure you gather up all the contact information you need, so that after the event, you can connect with the participants on LinkedIn. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile yet, you most definitely need to create one. Most virtual meetings will ask the participants to share their contact information. So if you're prepared and know who you want to connect with, you can make sure that you get that before the meeting ends. And in some situations, the meetings are recorded, so you can replay it later, listen to it, and figure out who you might want to connect with. If the content is available, most likely the host will let you know where you can find it. All right, that's enough for me. So at this time, I'm going to turn it back to Catherine, and she will discuss our final 3 tips with you.
Thank you, Liz. So it's my pleasure to address the final 3 tips that we have for you today. So for our next tip, we will discuss the importance of engaging in a conversation with questions. It is always important to ask open-ended questions or to ask why during your networking conversations. If there is open time for interaction with participants during your networking event, it is often best to fill it with conversations for other participants. When you ask questions and listen to their responses, you're going to make that person feel valued. If you don't happen to have a good open-ended question based on the conversation that's taking place, that's okay. Asking why can often further that conversation. Some good examples of open-ended questions for you to ask may include, how do you like working for your company? What are your primary roles and responsibilities at your company? How did you get involved with the field that you're in? What projects may you be working on? And you can build off of those types of questions. It will also be worthwhile for you to keep a pen and a notepad or even a Word document open up on your laptop or tablet to write down the answers to these questions for you to refer to later. So remember, even if the person you're speaking with can't directly help you with your goal or help you reach that goal, consider their network and the expanded network that they have. There may be someone within their own little circle that can help you reach those goals. So if you could be a good listener who asks those excellent questions, is actively engaged in the event, you will absolutely stand out from the other networkers. And when it is your turn to answer questions from participants, be sure to answer it clear and concisely and just try to avoid turning it into rambling. And bringing a positive attitude to the networking event is our next tip for today. Even though most of us are absolutely feeling nervous and scared for the future, positivity during networking calls and events is contagious. We've hosted a number of events through the PHRA, and even though things are a little rough outside right now, attending these networking events can leave you with a really feeling absolutely uplifted and just with a positive new outlook. So if you're able to, share some of your coping mechanisms or best practices for reducing stress right now. Tell participants something that you found inspiring, or share some good news that you've had within your own circle. Or even ask a question that has a positive spin on it, like, what is the thing that you're most proud of that you've done during this unprecedented time? Then sit back and let others share the things that they enjoy or the good news that they may have. Everyone will leave the call feeling better, and if they attribute that feeling to you, then that's amazing. In addition to making sure that your words are positive, you want to ensure that your facial expressions and body language exude that same positivity. So you always want to make sure that you are making eye contact with the camera, engaging in the conversation when you aren't speaking by nodding your head, just as you would do in person. Avoid crossing your arms, and again, always be mindful of those facial expressions. And now that we have brought the positivity in, we need to keep the negativity out. So that will be our last tip for today. So it's no secret that we are facing something brand new and nerve-wracking. And sometimes we just want to vent to other people, and obviously we're all going through something pretty similar. But when meeting new people who you would like to have help you reach goals, it is better practice to make sure your first impression is a positive one. So please try to avoid bringing personal problems, gossip, or things like bad employers into the discussion. If negativity happens to find its way into the discussion that you're having during your networking event, revert back to the last tip that we just discussed and think of a question for you to ask the group that can try to spin whatever negativity you're talking about into something positive.
Well, thank you, Catherine. These are all great tips, and over the course of the last 10 months or so, we definitely have been learning and building on these tips throughout the course of the year. And it's funny because just yesterday I read an article. Like, it's not funny, but it's the time we're in. I just read an article in Forbes magazine that was titled "Virtual Networking: A Trend That Shouldn't End." So, virtual networking is here to stay. And I truly hope our tips help you to become more comfortable with the virtual Join Now environment. What I have learned is that virtual networking is driven by the need to allow individuals to grow their personal network and connections, and in turn drive awareness and opportunities to learn and solve problems together, which is very similar, exactly the same as in-person networking, just that join now option is not there. You're kind of thrown into it. But if done correctly, virtual networking creates a safe space for people to gather and support each other. And just, if I could just remind you of one thing, just remember that simple gestures can often have a very big impact. And I hope that our 8 tips are helpful for you throughout navigating this new virtual world. Now we'll just turn it over to you guys and ask if anybody has any questions for us.
Well, thank you so much for the very, very helpful and important tips. We did get a question that came in. How can younger professionals build an at-home work environment on a budget? Do you have any recommendations for technology or must-haves?
Well, Catherine had mentioned it. The ring light that I'll show you guys that I'm actually using is $12, so you need that. And if you looked at, if I was able to show you guys my setup right now, I look very much like the Fetterman slide that Catherine had shared. I have earlier in the bio, it was read that I reside in Frankfurt, Germany with my family. We're here on an assignment for my husband's employment. And right now we are dealing with 3 children who are working, or not working, but doing school from home, my husband who's working remotely. So I'm basically shoved in a corner right now with my computer up on books as well, and on a $15 table. So you don't need a lot to be productive. You just need to find an area where you feel it's quiet, it's tidy in a way that you could get your work done, but an office on a budget is very easy. You have to sit down and figure out what it is that you need to be productive, and all of it can be found very cost efficiently. You don't need a big desk and drawers and lots of folders and things. I also work out of a bag. So you just got to figure out what works for you. You don't need anything fancy.
Thanks, Liz. And Catherine,
Yeah.
is there anything specific that you have found that's really been helpful for you?
So there was a tip that I had learned. Her name is Nancy Furby. She facilitated some networking events for us right around the start of all of this madness. And she had said something that really struck out to me, and it's just to use what you already have. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy something. And it causes you to think in a different way. So the table that I have behind me is actually just a plant stand. And I now have 2 lights coming up, and lamps rather, coming in front of me that I've pulled from different rooms. So luckily nobody can see what's around you, but it's just to think outside of the box and to use what you already have. When I was previously in my apartment, I had some just textbooks that I had from HR courses. Actually, one of them was a gift from you, Liz, and I had a fake lemon plant on top of it, and it looked clean and professional, and those were all things that I had already had at home. Absolutely, there's no need to break the budget, just to get creative with what you already have within your space.
Oh, that's fantastic. Definitely some good tips. And I think the idea of, considering your background, since you're recommending that the cameras be on, that the virtual backgrounds aren't necessarily the best option for networking, considering what you have in your background, looking at that placement can be really helpful as you're setting up.
Mm-hmm.
So
I also, I was really interested in the comment that you made about the nonverbal communication. I'm not sure that's something that we often think about, that the message that we're sending when we're in the virtual world, especially if we're in a networking event, we're supposed to be there to collaborate and, share with each other. And if we're not smiling, or we're engaging in behaviors that are distracting, I really think that makes a big statement. And just like when you're communicating, we need to consider the message that nonverbal communication is sending. Mm-hmm. I was really intrigued that you included that in the presentation. I think it was a great tip.
Yeah, that reminds me of, work in sales, and we used to joke, and this was back in the days of payphones, so a number of years ago, that payphones were silver and reflective, so that when you were making sales calls in your territory, you could be watching to ensure that you did have that smile on your face and you sounded pleasant on the phone. So speaking of nonverbal, as Sandy brought up, what have you learned about nonverbal communication over the last year? What else should we be emphasizing, such as, the smile that we've already talked about? Is there anything else we should pay attention to?
Well, it really depends on the type of networking event that you're participating in. Now, if you're sitting there and it's an open networking forum where you are there to meet and greet with people and it's asking silly questions to get to know each other, silly icebreakers and things, the nonverbal communication can be, there's a wide range of what is acceptable in that type of a situation. If you're sitting there and it's for an interview, I mean, I would say that it's professional, sitting straight up, looking directly in the camera, almost making eye contact with the camera as if you were making eye contact with the person on the other side. And just in general with all of them, I mean, the main thing too is keep the cell phone away. I know that it's hard, especially when if it's next to you and you hear it buzzing and things, but regardless of the networking event that you're at, that's a no-no, because then that means that you're not fully engaged no matter what the conversation is that you're currently having. Catherine, did you want to add anything there?
I think you summed it up excellently. It definitely is to just, I mean, you're mindful of the way that you're presenting yourself when you're in person, and the same thing applies when you're attending an event from your home. The same thing applies. We've attended calls where people are eating breakfast in the middle of a networking event, and while it's fine to be eating, I just don't necessarily know that I would be doing it in the middle of a networking event, or finishing up your dinner, or whatever the case may be. It just making sure that you're presenting yourself as professionally as possible. And you're right, it does absolutely depend on the type of event that you're attending. Yeah. And I also think that the networking virtually has lended itself a little bit more leniency, so people are able to be a little bit more lenient. So if like there's a dog popping up in the background, it's okay. I apologize if you can hear mine crying in the background, but if those types of things do pop up, I think that this new virtual world has lended that self to be a little bit kinder to it.
Yeah, it seems like there's an element of real life that just lends itself to this type of engagement. And Absolutely. We get to see little glimpses of people that we otherwise may not have seen.
Right.
And along those lines, since so many people are working at home, are you finding that employers are becoming more receptive and more open to virtual networking opportunities? For example, having side conversations, sharing resumes virtually during events or other gatherings?
Yes, I do. Virtual networking across the board with corporations has just become more acceptable because it's just the way that things now have to be. Such as I know just this coming week, there's all kinds of virtual holiday parties that a lot of our members are organizing. There's virtual job fairs that I know the Post-Gazette had 2 or so weeks ago. We just did a program last week for our student members on how to prepare for virtual interviews and virtual onboarding and things. So yes, there's a huge transition that has taken place over the last 10 months to make the corporate America more comfortable with virtual anything. So not just networking, everything.
Then are you finding that in virtual networking, and there are different ways that this might happen in different platforms, but are breakout rooms or small group sessions being utilized? And if so, how?
They are very much so being utilized. So in a lot of our learning and professional development type offerings, breakout groups are used to dive deeper into different topical areas. So if we're doing a diversity, equity, and inclusion seminar, we might put people in breakout rooms to one room to talk about how you could manage bias, another breakout room, talking about macroaggressions and things. So we definitely are using breakout rooms to for our larger programs to give the opportunity for those to network and brainstorm on topics at a smaller scale.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems like this idea of being able to be part of the larger group, but still have those side conversations is something that has translated fairly well in virtual networking.
I just was going to say, even in maybe some of our more relaxed type networking events, we also do go into breakout rooms it might be a funny topic, somebody that can pull out the funniest hat or something, and then in the breakout room, they nominate who has the funniest hat, and then they come back to the larger group and laugh about it. But even in the larger networking groups, they're breaking down into smaller groups to just make sure that everybody is getting a chance to meet each other rather than just the one person speaking to the whole audience at one time.
I've also developed a habit of using the chat. So when people are introducing themselves, I try to take notes of real quick notes of who they are, and you know, so that if I can identify, as you were saying in the presentation, individuals that I might be interested in carrying on a conversation with. And then if possible, I try to connect with those individuals through the chat. I think I feel a little more comfortable with the chat than actually speaking. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, or if it's okay. It's just what I notice I've done.
I would say that's very common from what I've seen. Most people
Absolutely.
are more comfortable with using the chat feature than speaking up. And that is a great point there too, is that in the presentation we talked about making those connections, and I specifically highlighted LinkedIn, but it makes 100% sense to just connect with them right there through the chat option. You can send direct messages, they're right there, they're live, and hopefully you can capture their contact information that way and then move forward with the LinkedIn and things later.
Absolutely. And speaking as an introvert, networking is not necessarily, it's something I have to work to be good at. But I know personally, I apologize about the dog, but personally, it's much easier to send messages through the chat than to say something and speak out loud. And then that way everybody's eyes are on me and they know exactly what I'm doing. So it just keeps it on a more personal, a little bit more of an intimate level. So I would say absolutely that if that's something you're comfortable with, use that chat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we did have another question come in, and what changes have emerged within your industry over the last year that you feel might become longer term norms?
Just flexible work schedules and remote work. Those are 100% going to be long-term norms. Just the different Family Medical Leave Acts, the Disabilities Acts, all of those have changed significantly because of all the uncertainties that have arisen, and we're going to continue to see that coming into 2021 for sure. But I would say the biggest is just dealing with the workplace flexibility and remote schedules at this point, and ensuring that everybody is still set up to work remotely, as well as just the different record keeping and timekeeping and all of that tracking that now has to come into play when you can't physically see your employees all the time.
Are you seeing more HR professionals wanting to reach out to each other virtually through networking opportunities for that support?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm being invited to a lot more events. I just had a networking event, an HR roundtable this morning. Mm-hmm. And I know I really appreciate them because I feel like I need that support right now.
Right. Yes, they're most definitely, HR professionals are trying to reach out more so virtually with one another. As I mentioned, with all of the uncertainties that have hit the HR profession at this point, everybody needs a sounding board and wants to share what their best practices have been and work together to get through this. This more people coming together, the stronger they are, and more ideas they have to move their corporations forward through these uncertain times, for sure. And unfortunately, virtually is the only way they can connect right now. The only safe way they can connect right now.
Well, and thinking about that idea of connection, since we've been talking about networking, and you mentioned that, employers aren't necessarily able to see their employees in person, kind of oversee their work. Are there other trends or types of maybe networking or connecting that you're seeing employers doing? Maybe some creative things, more so than just scheduling a staff meeting on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to answer that, Catherine?
Hopefully I'm answering this correctly. I believe one of our networking chair had mentioned that her company is finding ways to keep everybody involved through things like games. They're hosting like trivias or virtual bingos, a whole slew of different opportunities to get the whole team involved. And there's a friend of mine that works for a bank that I'm hearing the same thing, that her company is getting involved through virtual happy hours and trivia nights. Just a little bit more, I guess it seems to me that these are ways to keep people engaged and entertained, and they can't do these things out in the real world like we normally would. So we're engaging them through, trivias and virtual means.
You hit my point exactly. That's what I was going to mention. our networking chair had mentioned that her company was trivias and things of that nature to keep people engaged and build the team still, keep the teams together.
Yeah, that seems to be an important part of this. While we are separated, we are still together. We're still part of one team.
Right.
I guess this lends then itself to a kind of a different philosophy of team building and being able to bring everyone together. But maybe there are, for companies that have multiple locations, are these things that they've been doing for a while? Maybe they're ahead of the curve.
I'm sure that there are organizations out there that most definitely have done things in that nature, but at least from my knowledge with our members, they were all kind of starting from ground zero, trying to work their way through this to bring everybody together. But now for those organizations that do have their companies are spread out nationwide, now I'm sure they have that down pat and they're all more connected, or it will be more connected in the future than they ever have been because of the new use of the different technologies and things. So it's only going to make things better in the long run for us, connecting us.
Well, and along those lines with the idea of, virtually connecting and networking, are you seeing any significant changes in interviewing and hiring processes? Maybe they're building in networking in different ways or building in other kinds of virtual connections?
Well, I don't know about the virtual networking, but I do know that they are, at least from what I have heard recently from members, they're still doing the behavioral based type interviews. It's just now becoming virtual. And it feels like it's more of a conversation for those that are doing the interview now, more so than, so maybe it takes the stress off of the candidate a little bit more once you get used to the virtual environment and not being present in the room. It's more conversational than it would be as, I guess, takes some of that stress and nerve out as when you're sitting there in an office with somebody going through the interview. So yeah, I guess actually that would be a little bit more like virtual networking because it's more of a conversation than an interview.
And the same tips that you've mentioned today would likely apply in that kind of environment as well.
100%. Yes, I would definitely take a listen to this right before the interview and jot down your introduction, your clear and concise introduction, and go for it.
I missed the mute button there for a minute, sorry. I started talking and realized there was nothing coming out. We did get another question. This is interesting. Do you feel the movement to work from home to remote in our virtual world now has developed additional trust or empowerment of employees, or is this something that they may continue to grow in the future? So you wonder how much this, what impact this remote working in the virtual world is having on trust or empowerment of our employees.
Mm-hmm. I would say that that's in a case by case type scenario. It depends on the manager. In my case, I would look at that as long as the work is getting done, you can see if the product is complete, then there's no issues of trust. And I think from a manager's standpoint, you also need to learn how to manage remotely to help provide the tools necessary for somebody to be successful to work from home and work remotely. So I think there's needs to be a partnership between the two. Some it might be easier to work from home than others, and just might take a little bit more coaching to manage the time effectively so that they can still be successful. And then in some cases, the manager needs to be coached in an aspect that they might need to stand back a little bit and let things work out on their own. And as long as the product's there, the trust should be there. Catherine, did you want to add to that?
I think you summed that up perfectly. I mean, speaking from my individual perspective, having this flexibility and trust has absolutely led to an increased sense of empowerment and self-fulfillment. And I hope that that's something that is becoming a trend. But unfortunately, I think it does boil down to a case-by-case and manager-by-manager basis.
Well, thank you so much. And this idea of empowerment is a great point to end on, since with our Women in Industry initiative, we're so focused on educating and empowering. And I think you've done both in our session today, and educating us on virtual networking and empowering us to put our best selves forward as we continue on in this virtual realm. So thank you so much. I'm going to transition over to Sandy to wrap us up today.
Okay, so one more slide. I want to thank Liz and Catherine both for joining us today. I really think a lot of the tips that you provided us with today really apply to, networking, meetings, presentations, and they're not going to go away. It's not going to end at a certain date next year, maybe with a vaccine. I think these are all tips that we can carry into our career, because we're going to continue seeing that virtual aspect of our career. So they're great tips, and I thank you for joining us today and for sharing those with us. So we have a couple save the date. This is actually the last Win Wednesday for the fall term. We still have Accelerating Women in Industry, the WIN event that coincides with International Women's Day. That is scheduled for Friday, March 5th. It's a half-day workshop on holistic resilience. We are going to be having some, SHRM credits associated with the breakout sessions. If you joined us last year, the keynote speaker actually was the past president of PHRA. It was Janet Manuel. So we're hoping to continue the momentum from last year that Janet left us with this year. We will also begin the Win Wednesday virtual speaker series again. We will have a full schedule rolling out very soon, so you can check your mailboxes and social media in January for a full schedule. But our first event will be February 3rd with Cassandra Coleman. She is the Executive Director of Pennsylvania Commission for United States Semi-Quincentennial, wow, I butchered that. The America 250 PA, which was actually a competition that our students participated in last year. We also are starting a new event under WIN this year. We are going to start Fireside Fridays. This is going to be a monthly discussion series, and the first Friday is going to be February 5th, and it is going to be with Women, Sports, and Leadership, the WISE organization. We are going to continue taking RFP for the summer of 2021. So if you have any interesting topics or know someone that has a great topic you would like to share with WIN, please email me or Doreen, and we would be really welcome all of those topics. So again, I want to thank Liz and Catherine for joining us. And as always, I want to remind you that you're not alone, and together we're going to make a difference. So have a wonderful holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.